talk about Jim's. The talk was so full, it's hard to respond to any one point. That you could talk for about 3 or 4 weeks, I think, on the issues that were raised, most of which I think is very attractive. I will bow out on the last 10 minutes of it, except as a vehicle for getting to something else. But the question is how, if ever, can any of that be realized without making everyone into a Zen self-contemplative monk, or a formalist, which is the other thing. When you describe Turner in terms of the, I forget the word you used, I would have thought you were going towards the atmosphere beyond place rather than the description of pigment upon canvas. So I mean, there is a question, at what point does one become so focused? Well, anyway, there's too much to respond to. I wouldn't.
But you weren't, David. David Jakes, Andrew.
I was really excited by the lecture of Georges Descamps, and I had a very clear thought. Well, we are discussing the landscape in a way that that maybe can compare it with discussing making a symposium about love. I mean, we discuss blah 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 blah, but then suddenly there was this Georges Descamps story about the path, and I think for me it was the message. Well, you shouldn't discuss love; you should make love, and that was so that convincing. It's really, I mean, the climax of the day for me.
It's not very. Merci. It's not very easy.
Just a brief comment to Jim, which is the irony of the desert as the disappearance, in a sense, of landscape, because of course to call something a desert is precisely an extraordinary cultural assumption. I think many ecologists would say the desert is as populated and as real and as present as anything else. And it seems to me that this ends up in a highly romantic view.
Runs the risk. Runs the risk. And basically I'm trying to say that
Is your mic on?
if you can somehow make a meaningless project, that's good.
If there is no question, I would like to react on a few things that have been said today. It was impossible for me to talk before. You know, it's hardly. I hate lecturing. You guessed that maybe. I mean, it's a kind of torture. I prefer to talk like this, except that I don't like to be in front of everyone. But I'm not making immodest. It's true. I'm shy. Kind of Swiss based. But when someone says that Le Corbusier, fortunately Jeff is not here, but I can't in a school of architecture say that Corbusier is not interesting with landscape. Well, it's at least not take it for granted, my dear students, because someone said the promenade architecturale. For me, this is something that we could think about. In terms of air, I mean, all his architecture could be seen as an internal landscape. And if you go through his writings, he's always playing. And I used his writings when I was lost into nature, because it's not so easy for an architect. I'm absolutely not a landscape architect. I'm a Swiss architect, which is nearly the same. But Le Corbusier says, well, just think of a big house, a huge house. Trees are columns. You know, and this metaphor, or this way of seeing landscape with carpets, doors, and so on, is very tricky but very useful. And and talking about airports, he says he made one project for an airport, and he also used a lot of notation. I think there is a link between observation and project, by the way. I don't see how you can project if you can't observe. I think it's possible to observe and not make project, but to project without observing seems really something difficult. If you can't say how long this room is, how could you plan yourself one room? Well, it's like a musician who does not compare do and re. But it's an enigma in the architectural education that we project without observing, actively, I mean. Well, Le Corbusier insists in the airport to the sensation of opening. I know it's impossible now in this huge, completely, in my point of view, crazy airport. I mean, I was delighted. Huh? In any case, all of this lecture was for me so questioning what I do, and I don't come here to say what I do, I'm satisfied. I just ask for your reactions, just to learn something. But I can't say that I am, I mean, the very young people, it's their duty to shake the world. For the older, it's a bit more problematic for me. But I mean, in any case, I couldn't think that I am very optimistic for the world, I must say. And I am very often argument with Herzberger, which seems floating on a world of everything is going. I mean, Schiphol Airport double in 5 years. Very good, very good. Okay, very good. That means, I mean, for me, Heathrow and the fact that as a pilot I can't experiment the world as I did when I was flying in my grass camp near Geneva indicates something that we are, I can't be sure that we are right, to be a bit euphemism. I mean, I need more circumspection about what we do with the world. You were saying this metaphor with love. I would say, in other words, I see the difference between flowers and an image. I mean, I am really a Swiss peasant, but I use my bon sens and I trust it. I think some message in the air is that you don't have to trust your experience, and I don't like it. I would like to say you have the right to stop, to say, well, you know, I try to, I mean, tendency to use very simple words. I know it's dangerous, but as Mark said this morning, after all, between bad and good architects, there is a lot of difference. You can use the words you like, but if you go and see Alvar Aalto's work, believe me about inside, outside. By the way, Jeff, talking about Frank Lloyd Wright, like according to Johnson, he's the best 19th century architects. Well, I'm not sure. But I'm not sure neither that Johnson is the best of the 20th century, for example. But talking about threshold, between inside outside, I don't see a master higher level than Frank Lloyd Wright, in my point of view. And what he said, what he did, and Brokehead City, for example, is could be revisited now about landscape. Now I stop, but one thing to finish. Everything is going too fast for me, really. And I share this sensation with Jean-Luc Godard, with whom I worked 1 year, doing a small shop. So we did 1 year, so we are really slow. But Jean-Luc Godard says, we make too many images. You know, I hate these images, not yours, coming from publicity. I prefer to see what Straub makes, what Godard makes, what other filmmakers made. I think the reality of images are more with these artists, philosophers, than with the blowing wind of publicity, Ismail. And Godard said, we have to very simple life as a part of the world. You know, I don't think, I mean, and a part of this, not a moralistic, accept what you said, I love simple life. I hate objects. When you see, I mean, not objects, but too many objects. When you see this film, Russian, not in the desert, but nearly in Mongolia, and you see they have one horse, one spoon, not even, I mean, 10 objects, that's all. I like that. I must say one.
Enrique Miralles. Come and use the mic. Seems to be easy to make the questions from here. No, I mean, I'm very impressed by the lecture. And one thing, and also at the end you make this kind of affirmation about, let's say, human personal sentiments or choice, that in a way it's the best or the easiest way to agree and to get in touch with things. No? And in that sense, I could understand, let's say, a lot of relations between your work and Richard Long, in that sense of almost the same empathy that we could see just by the way of Richard Long show his work. No? But I think maybe in a school that will be very, very nice if you could explain, and I think will be a very nice exercise, the differences in between you and Richard Long.
Yeah, with pleasure. He told me once the difference. And, except that I see the difference in terms of, let's say, I don't compare myself as an architect with Long as an artist, you know, the graduation, okay? But he told me a very simple thing, and I think it has something to do with our duties. He told me I could never be an architect. It's socially too much complicated. And recently I received a letter. It was written to me, domestic life is more complicated than art life. And I think architects, we have a very domesticated life. We have to talk with the authority. We have to talk with the people. I don't see that a good result come from ignoring the people. If you want to make painting, make painting. If you want to make sculpture, make sculpture. But you know, I have seen for the students, I have a lot of students. I suspect sometimes they hesitate to become painters, but because after all, there is a kind of a financial guarantee to be a liberal profession of architects. And there is a smell of security. So a lot of people who would like to be artists become architects, and with the consequences we have. So the difference between Long and me, I see that, and I must say, I like the work I do. I mean, the life, I have no choice to change anymore. But, well, we never know. But it is attracting when you see Richard Long's way of life, in a certain sense. It must not be so simple that seen from exterior.
I have the feeling that in a way you look at Richard Long in the same way as you look to stones or cows, no? No, really. No.
I would know.
No.
I mean, no, I'm sorry. I don't want to be the interpreter of what Richard Long's life, a way of living. But he's never. You must not make a confusion between Long and his work. He's completely different. I mean, you can't say because he does this simple work, he's a simple man. Not at all. I hope I'm not a single, slow, short-minding cows or cowboy. Could be. This is not my.
I was not meaning that. No, I would say the way in which, for instance, you discover a stone and clean it. No, I think. Yes, let's say, or you in a way accept or introduce that in your work. No, I think probably it's much more important the intuition behind from an organization point of view, and in that sense, I would say the work of Richard Long has the same value, the same value as testing something, in that sense that you see a cow testing something, or a kind of movement from a stone testing something. So I think in a way I was quite impressed that you show your work parallel to Richard Long, but I think that it is complete different worlds, no? And is what I like it to mention.
You know, Richard Long for me is 20 years ahead of architecture, and it's very interesting. I mean, it's normal because I think talking about seismographs, artists are faster than architects. If you know I mean, as we know all, the length or the time you need to make a project, it's not questionable that artists react more active, more quickly to the world. So it's better to look at what they do and to integrate in a way, I don't know. It's what we call a cultural culture du projet. No? I mean, it's a zeitgeist. Someone was talking about. I mean, we can't escape to be, in a way, companion of the artist of the day, you know, of the century, or at least, because I think the 20th century is ending, and we have not understood one word of what happened in that century in terms of science. I mean, if you look what we call geometry in our schools, I think nothing has happened apparently except a metaphorical acceptation of chaos or fractal or black holes, but nothing really understood, just the cream on the surface. Play with words, but we make perspective. Or you jump in the contrary, you don't understand anything. I mean, chaotic is not chaos, no? Something different. It's a grid. We call, I mean, I think scientists call chaos the limit of their own grid. That does not mean that there is no. And I think we have lost in landscape, by the way. Someone, I think Christophe said that history does not repeat. It's not true. I mean, at least Grassi maybe said that, but Karl Marx, I think, said it repeats, but once. The first as a tragedy, the second times as a comedy, and I think, or a farce. And I think a lot of what happened now, when we have seen this project from Smithson, when you see that Smithson, this intelligent, sensible, good architects making this project, you are really creative, you fear of what you do. So this is the 50s, and I think now we start again. I have a bit the sensation, looking at drawings or proposals, that we are playing fun with the 50s. You know, nothing right angular. You know, the worst project, if you look at them, right angles, they become interesting when they shift a bit, exactly like the furniture in the 50s. You know, colors. I mean. But for me, it's really an accelerating process of repetition of history. Now we repeat the 50s in fashion, in architecture, I hope not in urbanism and in reality. As long as it remains on the drawing board, it's not. It's a kind of puberté. But when they start to build it, and I am afraid that I have never experienced building of Ramkolas with pleasure. I'm sorry to say that. It's a dance palace, for example. It hurts the dancer. You know, if you go there, it said, well, I'm not interested in details. I'm not. Alvar Aalto was not interested in details. It just worked on details. The problem, if you don't deal with details, you see only details when you enter the and bad details. So when you have corners, sharp corners like knife at the altitude of the body for a dancer, running from the stage to the room where he could rest, and he has a danger to hurt himself. I think this is absolutely irresponsibility and a kind of coolness that I'm questioning. I'm not saying that he's not a very exciting, stimulating man, but I would like to. I mean, I talk from where I am. I'm afraid of this tricky. It's always more interesting on drawing boards than in reality. You already mentioned Parc La Villette. I'm afraid it's just the same. If anyone has a pleasure in Parc La Villette, tell me. except the bamboo area, but really the Folies are really madness. I mean, it's absolutely cool. Frightening things. I mean, you go to Palais Royal or Jardin du Luxembourg. This is a garden, no? Very simple, gravel, seats and so on. Folly. It's bended and red. Okay, but if you enter, no pleasure. I mean, it's really. Sorry, but.
Bob Maxwell.
Forgive me if I don't know the names of the speakers because I don't hear very well. But I do think, George, I do think that we have been almost demonstrated in front of us here this afternoon the dialectic which Le Corbusier mentioned in man, that is to say, the man is a heart and a brain, because one of our speakers is all heart and the other, it seems to me, is all brain. Although I would not say that the one who has a brain does not have the heart and the other that has a heart does not have a brain. They are both, after all, alive, and therefore they must in some sense be individually whole. But what I think we have seen in the two presentations has been very interesting for me, because it seems to me that both our speakers have been in search of innocence, a sort of innocence. I'm talking here about the problems of living in the postmodern age, the problems which for me were formulated through the whole discovery of image and language, Saussure, Lévi-Strauss, Barthes, Derrida, and so on, whereby we have become hyper-conscious of the fact that for something to be brought into culture, it has to be made visible, on the general lines of Georg Simmel, who said that one form must displace another. And the question then is, how do we get out of an endless succession of one form displacing another? I'm reminded of the method by which Tafuri did this, by placing one of his feet very firmly on a hypothetical position where there would be justice, there would be social justice, from which point of view the various emanations of culture, including in architecture, from bourgeois society, all seem to be postponements of the coming to face with the truth. But the problem of the postmodern age is that we now know that we cannot come to face with the truth. So we have to, by artifice, and you were very candid to explain that your ideas were also requiring artifice and presentation. We have now, by the means of rhetoric, to project a condition which would be, in a sense, innocent. And that is a very difficult problem. In a certain kind of way, the appearance of innocence can be achieved. It is one way of framing, and art always does this. Every fresh appearance of art recreates innocence. But then, on the question of time, as time continues, that innocence tinges into dirt and becomes part of the cultural heritage. It becomes, therefore, part of an accumulation, and it becomes, as Georg Simmel said, an obstacle to fresh discovery. So they have the problem then of how to get away from the consumption of art. And it seems to me that there is a problem here, which is to do with the fact that so long as this can be made a mystery, and that is to say, as long as you have students, it is possible to construct a horizon where this will be attained. He's nodding. I hope some of the students are noticing that he's nodding and take that into account. This is why some of us like to work with students, because students have an infinite capacity not for taking pains, but for seeing the magic horizon of innocence. That innocence which will in fact validate their own lack of accumulated knowledge. But it seems to me that there's a paradox in this. What I could expect would be that every freshness that's created becomes tinged with dirt and becomes consumed. And if it is so disappeared that it cannot be consumed, then who does it benefit? I ask this question of the cow, because the cow, patiently munching, appears to be innocent, just like the stones it uncovers and washes, a certain innocence just going along. But if you ask the question, who owns the cow, who sells the milk, all that, then it turns out that the cow is but an agent for another power. Now, I think to me the other half of our problem is that we don't know who the other power is, because power has become so bifurcated into the machinations of world capitalism that nobody is any longer responsible for it. National governments are clearly unable to control this process. So the problem is that the process is out of control, and I can't see this control being brought back in until the ecological equation gets much, much worse, which may not take very long.
I'd just like to make points about the last speaker. I think there are points being missed by some people at the front of the audience about how interesting and vibrant the landscape really is. I think that architecture is part of the landscape. The landscape is not part of the architecture. You might have been presenting it using your mind, but we've got to pick it up using our hearts. We've got to actually then put it back onto the landscape.
David Jakes.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to ask George, who has presented himself as a very slow designer, let's say careful, shall we? I'm interested in the idea that sort of at one moment you will intervene, and another moment you won't. You said, well, you brush the landscape, that's sort of minimal impact, and yet on the other hand you put up that sort of great metal cage around the Belvedere. And then at one moment you were obviously conserving, you were carefully repairing that parapet wall. And yet at another moment you were destroying steps of which you clearly didn't approve. So do you have any rules? Do you have any sort of guidelines to yourself, any axioms as to when to intervene? Because that seems to be a crucial issue with your work.
As you guess, I am not a theoretician, but nevertheless, I try to think, use my brains. I'm in between two projects, so it's a kind of a more or less organized, methodical thought, just to prepare myself to the next project. It's not my word exactly, it's a Michel Foucault's elaboration, but I agree completely. So I don't aim to, I'm not able, that's clear, but I have no envy to make a general theory on the landscape. But I think methodic, I don't know if it's English, I have a kind of method, a rule to use your word. That was not to add anything which was not already there. Of course, the word add. Not to start from nothing, but I said I accept or I need a superposition of this state, refounded state of the things, attention coming from my design. This is a work of architecture, of landscape architecture, with a coherence in form, or let's say in form. So I make a modification of a situation that I didn't export. So, for example, the Belvedere was there. What is important for me in my method, I don't know if I'm right, but there was a Belvedere. So I don't choose, for example, another point of view. I'm just, I don't say it's not possible. It's just, it's so already complicated enough for me. So I said, my rule is I go where from 200 years ago, from 200 they go to see the world. So I go the same. But I change this for security reasons. I had to. Because if you have, in this landscape, ordinarily, you have 10 people a week. Now we had 1 million with children and so on, with 200 meters, you know. So instead of parachute, we put a kind of protection. You know? And I didn't want it to keep that. This is why we had 2 grid, not only for that. So, you know, the project is, you could, first, there is no simple answer to your question. There is a kind of my rule, this, but yours could be completely different. What I pretend is to have a coherence from the start to in the project. So I hope my work as a grammar or a formal coherence that make you possible to understand what I try to do with the landscape which was there. I use the word landscape to be simple, and what I did. I wanted, once again, I wanted to show the movement of things, that it is nothing natural, I agree, nothing forever, but maybe the way I made this grid is because there was a tennis grid before, because they always use metal in the 19th century. But now, if you ask an ecological integrist or ecological, he said no. If you don't do it in metal, do it in wood. Sure. So, you know, this kind of not provocation, I don't like, but this kind of clarification of an intensity that I try to put. So, the stairs in the forest, I hate this kitsch used of, but it's a taste problem maybe. But I think it's a work of confusion, because it's you know who did this? Not the. It's the army. They have a cultural department, so they use the army to make what they think the people like. So I destroyed it and I use a more neutral, in a way, more less affective pseudo. I would say kitsch in the sense of Gadamer called kitsch, the art which gives you nothing else that you expected from him. It good definition of kitsch. The art does not give you more than expected. I hope to renew the regard on the things by emotion, not didactically. I'm not going to put poster, look at it. No, if the emotion is not here, I have lost the project. So sometimes it's powerful, sometimes it's you know, I play, and you know, when you do a project like this, you have maybe 30 objects, and we built 5. So we spent 5 years to make 25 objects that we just didn't do because it was too much. So I think the project is also for me a process of forgetting bad ideas. So it's why I need time, just because I'm slow, so I don't see what is really bad, and maybe it was too quick for me now. Really, without playing.
We must draw this day to a close. What we want is one last brilliant question. That's a way of guaranteeing silence. George, you had one last comment.
No, not brilliant, but I would say that please don't take my position as a kind of manifesto too orgullious. I was delighted, and if I came here, it was to hear you, all this, and the reaction of the public. Really, I came here to work, not to show my work. That's different, and because it's why I believe that we have all a part of this. We all try to do something, and one in one direction, the other in the direction, and we have to talk together. I mean, I don't know how it is. It was beautiful 20 years ago, the AA. I'm sure it's very well. But in our school, Institut d'Architecture, it's so difficult to talk with the people now. It's also part of the body, you know. Talk. So this place like here are kind of miracles. We have to keep this kind of AA, which is a haptic for me. Not, I'm sure that when someone looks this video, he may have some the kind of pleasure you have looking a picture of a good meal that we will have now.
Robert has one last. Well, I was actually going to let him, my other panelist, also my co-moderator, will close the day. I think the past has been wonderful. I am, unlike Bob, unable to sum them up so easily, and I don't think the new is always, or is almost never innocent now, and it's a very complicated world we move into. Thank you. But James, let me let you close the day.
I'm sort of tired and jet-lagged at this point. I would simply say in conclusion that landscape is a project, and there's work to be done. Thank you.